Today on the Coach White Podcast, we have a very special guest joining the show today. He's very successful when it comes to the sport of volleyball. He is the head coach up in the state of Minnesota. He's Minnesota College Athletic Conference South Division Coach of the Year in 2021, 2022, and 2023. North Plains A District Coach of the Year in 22 and 23. Region 13A Coach of the Year in 22 and 23, as well as District A District Champions and Region 13 Champions in 2022 and 2023 as a team. I also believe that's 2024, just has not been updated when it comes to the time of this show. 2021, he took his team to a Region 13A tournament appearance. In 2022, he took his team to a Division III JUCO Final Four. The following year, in 2023, he took that same team to a Division III national tournament, and he was the runner-up as a team. And in 2024, he took that same team back to the Final Four. Very successful coach with a lot of accomplishments. He's done a very good job up at this school. We welcome Coach Jay Kam to the Coach White Podcast. With the world of coaching evolving and the carousel always changing, we're going to sit down with some coaches and we're going to figure out what they coach, how they coach, and most importantly, why they got into this profession. My name is Kason Wilkinson, and I am your host of the Coach's Why Podcast.
That's a great question.
That was my Coach's Why.
Welcome back to another Coach's Why Podcast, guys. We have a very special guest in the building today, Coach Jay Kam from Century College, northeast of St. Paul up in Minnesota. Coach, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. Of course. I'm super excited to have you come on the show today. Coach is the head volleyball coach up there, so I'm super excited to talk a little bit about the sport and kind of dive into, maybe some of the schematics a little bit about it, but just in general kind of get to know you as a coach. So I know you said you've listened to a few of these before, so kind of the same intro to it. I'm going to let you kind of let everybody know kind of where you grew up, where you're from, and then when you got involved in sports in general, or of course maybe volleyball if you had the chance to play that.
Yeah, my history is kind of convoluted. It's one of those where I grew up in Okinawa, Japan, and so I went to an international school because I'm Chinese, and so it's kind of one of those things where it was a small school. They just needed people to play sports, and we basically played every single sport: basketball, volleyball, soccer, and you were a multi-sport athlete. Was the coaching spectacular? Sometimes it was good. Sometimes it was, whoever was there, And so, that's kind of where I came from. And then moving to the United States when I was 18, went to a community college out in LA. And then after a couple years in LA, I moved to Seattle Pacific University. And then that I really kind of fell in love with intramurals and just doing everything, I have always loved competition. I was never really spectacular at any particular sport, but for me, it was just a lot of fun. And so, just the community that it brings, that was the goal, in terms of how we ended up coaching. Is that coming up, or should I answer that question now?
No, definitely. Yeah, it's going to be a question later on for sure. Yeah, it's definitely going to be a question on how you got to it for sure. I'm interested, especially because you came, you grew up in that, obviously internationally, right, before you came to the States. And so, like, what was that experience like for you? I mean, growing up, and then what was like the change that maybe you, I guess like culture shock, I guess is what people call it when you move even from one state to another. But I mean, like, were you prepared to come to the States and kind of what to expect here, whether personally or when you got into like the intramurals and how the sports might be different from where you were to here?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I graduated in the mid-90s, so, okay. As we say in the United States, everyone's a latchkey kid. Well, that's kind of how we were in Japan, There definitely were some not issues, but like some culture shock, right?
Absolutely.
Being Chinese growing up in Japan, you were always the other, right? You know what I mean? And so Same thing, moving to the United States, right? Coming from another country, going to a community college out there, you just felt a little bit different, right? Like you didn't grow up with the same kids that were at the community college. You don't have no idea what they're talking about. Everything is delayed by about 5 years, like once a movie comes out in the United States, then 5 years later, it'll come out in Japan.
Oh, really?
And,
okay.
Yeah, so it is, right? And so I felt like, the music that I listened to, everything like that, it was always a couple of years later. So, in the mid 90s, for me, while everyone was listening to grunge, we were still listening to like Metallica and AC/DC, like the rock just prior to that. So that's kind of just how I would describe it. In terms of the athletics, so I went to a international school and we played a lot of military teams. So like all the service members, their families, they would go to like DoD schools, so Department of Defense schools, and they would form their, volleyball, soccer, basketball teams, things of that nature. And then they would hold like these Far East tournaments. So like Guam and Korea and Japan, like we would all get together and play in these gigantic tournaments, and so that's kind of how we made it work. But then on top of that, we would also play against the Japanese teams, and I don't know if you are really into like Haikyuu or any of the Japanese anime when it comes to like athletics, but if you watch it, it's very similar to what actually goes on in Japan, you know what I mean? Right. And just that rigor and that dedication, One thing that I was reading about, what's the biggest difference in Japan and that's different from the United States, and then, so my background is in exercise science. I have a master's degree in physical education. And so for me is one of those things where, in the United States, physical education is you show up, everybody goes and plays a different sport. Some kids love the sport that they're playing in. The ones that don't love the sport that they're playing in, they just kind of sit around and don't participate, Right. And then my daughter, who's 16 now, she absolutely hated PE, and coming from a PE teacher myself, I'm like, well, why, And she's like, well, it's always the guys who, the boys always just take the ball and they get throw it to the other boys and never get to the girls, right? Or the PE teacher always wants to play dodgeball, and so she's like, she's really good at dodging the ball, but she's not good at catching the ball. So, at the end of the game, she's the one dodging, and then so now the other team's trying to hit her with the ball, and then everybody on her team that got knocked out is like, why didn't you catch that ball? That was such an easy ball to catch, and so now she feels like she's getting like from both sides. So she's always hated PE. But I was reading about this gal who did an exchange program, and the reason why she loved Japan was because she was a volleyball player, and instead of taking a traditional PE class, right, you would actually take a volleyball class, right? And the volleyball class was year round. So you're with your peers, you're taking a class that you all enjoy, right? And then, so during school, you spend an hour and a half, just practicing PE, practicing playing volleyball, right? And then at the end of the school, then you would actually go and practice with your team. So essentially, you're just getting multiple hours of practice, And so that was one of the biggest things for me that I really drew from it. I'm like, okay, so I kind of like that rigor, I don't know. I know that I listened to some of your podcasts, and you're kind of a baseball guy, right?
I enjoy baseball. Yeah, I'm a wrestling coach, so I'm a wrestling coach here. But I grew up playing baseball, football, right? Kind of a lot of different sports growing up. But yeah, I ended up going to college at in Colorado for wrestling. So that's kind of what it was. But I'm a fan of all sports. I mean, I just had a golf coach on here not long ago, and we talked about golf, and I'm like, I never played it, but as I've gotten older, I've learned to kind of appreciate all sports, right? Like, and kind of the technicalities or maybe the passion behind it. Like I had my last volleyball, which has been a long time. At least I feel like it's been a long time. Like talking about, if you've never watched a fifth set in a volleyball game, especially a volleyball game that matters, right? A district game or a title game, or in your case, like a regional conference game, whatever, like that fifth set going to 15, it's really intense. So it's like, I guess I've just learned to appreciate all sports and kind of what each competition brings, for sure.
Yeah, you're definitely like me. I just love people doing whatever their skill is well. You know what I mean? I mean, it doesn't matter to me if it's cooking, if it's sports, whatever. Right? If you do something well, that's beautiful.
Absolutely.
And
I agree.
so the reason why I bring that up is I don't know how old you are, but do you remember when Ichiro first came from Japan to play for the Mariners? Like,
So, I was a I think he already came to the States whenever I was young. So because he retired in 2000. Oh, actually, maybe I might have been born. I remember when he first came. So I'm 29. So I was born in '95.
yeah,
So I think he just came to the States like not too long after that, like
he came
early 2000s, late 90s.
Yeah, 2001,
Yeah,
early
okay.
2001. So you were pretty young. Yeah. So I mean so he brought like this. He brought Japanese baseball to America, and everyone just like
Right.
watching him stretch and everything he warms up and all of that stuff. And it just kind of cracked me up because like that's what I was used to growing up. You know what I mean? Like it is,
Yeah.
right? Like they go and you go to the gym and all of the players are cleaning the floors. They are setting up the equipment. Yeah, and it's just like this discipline, right? That
Very true.
I didn't quite see in the United States when we got here. You know what I mean? It's funny because I coach club volleyball now, and before every practice, I have a bucket of towels, and I have my players, do a towel push, and we clean the floors. Because it's that sign of respect, right? This is our home, and we got to keep it clean, So there's just a couple of things that I've kind of taken in.
Yeah. Well, I can appreciate that too because and I know like Shohei obviously has brought a lot, and obviously now we're signing a bunch of international Japanese players to come play over here. But I guess touching base on what you mentioned just now about like the discipline and how like the what's the right terminology? Kind of like how each athlete that comes over from Japan kind of goes about their daily activities, like you said, just stretching, whatever. Like it seems like it's so disciplined when it comes to like the technicalities of their craft, right? It doesn't matter what it is. Like Japanese wrestling is really starting to make a big push, right? Which we just had this big show basically between some of America's best versus Japanese best, which there's other countries too represented, but it's just interesting because their craft, it feels like they're so like I guess like you said, like you were just so used to it, but like when you see it come over here and just how they are different from us and like not the competition level, but I guess the preparation and how they get to that level. It feels like technically wise, it's so fine, right? It's such a fine line, and I don't know why that is. I mean, you might know. Maybe it's just kind of instilled in the tradition over there. Maybe it's instilled in just like they have a chip on their shoulder because they have to do certain things differently in order to make it in different places. Like, I guess that's I guess from an outside view type of thing for me, anyways.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a combination of everything. You know what I mean? But like, I don't know. I think a lot of it comes back from like the history, right? Like, the Japanese hold like the past, so high up, right? Like the samurai and the shogun, and right, like,
right.
And this desire that if you're going to do anything, you're going to do it to the best of your ability,
Right.
And they just take a lot of pride in everything they do, and and there's definitely a lot of respect, right? If you ever see, I don't know if they probably in the wrestling mat, you ever see them bow, like when they walk into a building and then they bow,
for sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's just that sign of respect, I don't know, in terms of if they're just kind of carrying that on,
Yeah, for sure.
You go to Japan, I don't know if you've ever been, but you go to like McDonald's, like there's a 45-year-old manager there, you walk in, he's bowing and he's smiling, he's talking to you and everything like that. And then all of a sudden, when I first came to the United States, I was like, the manager is like a 20-year-old kid, who just got out of high school, and they're like, I'm like, huh. It's just completely different, and just the way that the mentality works. I'm not saying one's better than the other. It's just the way that they were raised. And so, so when they do come over, right? Do I think that they might be more technically sound? I can't say that for a fact, but just the way that they drill, And so now I'm going back to volleyball, and the way that they kind of drill. And so we always get into this huge conversation in the volleyball world, right? Whether we should do block training, right? Meaning that we do like hitting drills, standing on boxes, hitting, working on blocking, working on passing, or should it be randomized, right? Because volleyball is a random game. And so do we want to just keep playing the game, right? With different, things that we have to restrict, right? And then, so like say we're working on outside, hitting defense, and so we just have an outside hitter entering balls, and then we have to make those adjustments. I think both have merit, both, but if we want to hit the ball hard and we want to hit the ball high, right?
Yeah.
We kind of need that block training, So it's kind of a weird thing, I've kind of gone back and forth in terms of my philosophy on what we should do, and I definitely think at a younger age, I think that we should definitely teach technique, as we get older. Then we can become a little bit more randomized, right? If you can show me that you can hit this consistently, now hit it when it's 10 feet off the net, hit it when it's 3 feet outside the antenna. What are you going to do with it? And so that's kind of where we're at there. So it's kind of, for me, my coaching styles, I kind of have a mismatch of the two, So I do like the randomized, but I also do have a lot of pride in that rigor.
Each area, right.
Yeah, just do it well.
The technique.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm definitely going to get into that here in a little bit, because I'm very intrigued to see kind of what's kind of where you're at with how your practices are, or like you said, like deciding which one you prefer to go with. So I'm definitely going to touch base on that. And if you guys don't know who Coach Kam is and kind of his history here, I'm just going to kind of splurt it out. And I seems like, I don't know if he's going to ever say it, but I want to say it for him anyways. So Coach has had a really dang good career at Century when it comes to some of his achievements. And I'm going to do it anyways, Coach. So, you were a national runner-up in Division III in JUCO, right, in 2023. Your Final Four appearance in 2022. Obviously made the appearance in your respected region in 2021. So you had, back-to-back, kind of improvements each year, as well as Coach of the Year and all these different things, right? So before we kind of dive into that and kind of touch base on your success, because I don't, obviously whenever we get into coaching, in my opinion, we all want to find success, right? Like we're competitors at heart, but there's also that line of it where we're trying to make better people, right? That's kind of a big thing, right? Like we want to influence people in the right direction, or at least be a part of it, right? From whether it was from a coach from our past or whatever the case is. So when did you decide that coaching is what you wanted to do? Was it, I know you said that when you got in intramurals is kind of when you started really kind of, falling in love with certain games, or maybe the idea of coaching, but when did you decide, like, this is what I want to do? And I promise this is leading up to those things I just said, I promise.
Oh, no, I get it. No, I mean, I'm going to be completely honest with you, okay? If you asked me 25 years ago, like, when I graduated, like I'd be coaching and teaching in college and coaching volleyball, I would have just laughed in your face, So coaching was never on my mind. I honestly, teaching wasn't either. And it's just kind of one of those things where I'm like, you know what? I like summers off.
Yeah. right.
So I'm like, summers off is kind of cool. My wife started teaching, and I'm like, you know what? I'll go get my master's degree. Let's go ahead and teach, in college. So I went that's how I started in the schools, and I really enjoyed it. I love the students. I love the student interaction. College was slightly, more my thing, because, hey, if the students don't want to be there, they just don't show up. You know what I mean? So I don't have to deal with that other part with like the high school or middle school even. And so, but for me, when it came to coaching, my athletic director, so we had a really good baseball program at Century. Like when he was my athletic director, when he started that program, numerous World Series appearances, a national runner-up, numerous fourth place finishes. And they were doing fantastic. We had 3 kids drafted by Major League Baseball. And so, so, I mean, it was great for them, but you know how it is in college athletics. So we just had a baseball team. So we needed to have a women's team. And so he tried softball, he tried soccer, but none of them really tended to stick, And I always say when I'm recruiting, I always say, hey, you know what? The reason being is women are smarter than men, right? I said to him, I'm like, wow, why aren't women playing junior college athletics? Well, because there's really not that big of a future for them, right? There's no, while it's getting better in terms of the professional sports, You know what I mean? But I mean,
Fair.
the baseball boys,
fair. Yeah.
they all think they're going to be playing professional here shortly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so they don't let that dream go.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's been a big change over the last few years. And I say few years, really more the last decade or two, maybe, is the kids, if they're not going to that. I should say this on the baseball terms, maybe other sports now too, but for the most part, baseball in particular, if they are not going to that high level D1, they're really considering going JUCO just because as you mentioned, there's a lot of people who do get drafted out of either JUCO or they get a better opportunity after JUCO, right? So it's definitely a huge shift of the last 10, 20, I don't know if it's been 20 years, but specifically last decade or so for sure, in that mindset change.
Absolutely. So he couldn't find anything. And so softball failed, soccer failed. So finally he was like, I'm going to bring trap shooting. And I was like, I'm sorry, you can bring trap shooting? He goes, yeah, it's one of the fastest growing sports in the state of Minnesota for girls. And I'm like, we live in Minnesota where we have probably the highest capita of girls volleyball players. You know what I mean? And I'm like, you got to bring volleyball. I was like, hands down, you bring a volleyball program, you'll fill the team. And then so he's like, yeah, how about this? If we bring a women's volleyball team, you're coaching it. So that's how I started coaching. That's
okay. So you negotiated with them to bring it in. He's like, all right, you get okay.
I didn't want to coach it. You know what I mean? But I was like, but he wasn't. He was like, you coach it, because we started out as a club team. So he didn't want to do that commitment because he was like, are we going to get any players? And so we just kind of did that. And my very first tryout, because I'm not recruiting kids to come to play Century to burn a year to play club volleyball.
No,
and so
fair.
I just basically said, okay, let's just do a tryout. I had like 35 kids show up, which is pretty good, right? When you only need a team of like maybe 10 to 12, right? The only problem was I think only 3 of them actually had formal volleyball experience.
Experience. Yeah.
But that's cool though that you, dang, that's such an intriguing question. So like obviously you went from nothing to having to kind of form a team with tryouts, right? And we can get into the whole D3 conversation, right? With the scholarships and stuff as we go. But like, was that something that was, I guess, scary to you, right? Like the fact that he's like, hey, you're going to do this. Yeah. And I know you said you didn't really want to, but you were kind of, I wouldn't say forced in, but kind of like, hey, we'll do it, but you got to be that guy, right? Was that something were you scared to do that? I mean, I don't know if anybody else has ever experienced having to like step into a role like that. I'm sure some people have, but like, is that like, where were you at when he told you that, and when you had to go do your first, like you said, tryout?
Oh man. So I mean, as soon as I found that out, I basically found every single coaching clinic I could possibly go to. I reached out to all the coaches that I knew. I reached out to all the high schools in the area. And I just started picking people's brains, like how do they do it? Like what exactly is it that I'm looking for? And so I was trying to gain as much knowledge as I possibly could. And our first season was club season. We played a bunch of other college clubs, and it wasn't successful. We had a lot of fun, you know what I mean? But in terms of, I'm sorry, I should take that back. We didn't win a lot of matches, but we were successful, right? Like, what we were intended to do was to bring a program to Century and to give our student athletes an experience that they can remember, right? I think the hardest thing with junior colleges sometimes is we lack a little bit of community, right? And you kind of go to school and then you just go home, so you don't really get to meet anybody. And so to have something that you can be part of, right? That's kind of what the goal of it, And so we did okay. So then I was basically in my mind, I'm like, you know what? We're just going to have another club season next year. It's going to be even better because I have more experience. We're just going to be better. So in May, so we finished the season in April. In May, the athletic director and the dean lets me know that we've just entered the NJCAA, so the National Junior College Athletic Association, for the fall. And you guys let me know in May that we are going to be playing, like real volleyball. And I'm just kind of like, are you kidding me? And so now I have to recruit, but in May, which is for a fall sport, which is, I'm just like, there's no way.
Yeah. Behind the ball in every aspect.
Exactly. So then I picked my best players to return, and then I just recruited like crazy. And our first season, same thing, it was a big learning curve. Our record wasn't fantastic, but we definitely had some bones, that we were going to actually get. And then, so after that, I started recruiting like crazy. I'm reaching out to all kinds of people. I had a number of really high quality student athletes coming in, and then COVID happened. And so once COVID happened, I called because I had a couple kids coming up from San Antonio. And I called them up and I said, hey, look, you guys are still playing in Texas. We are not, and so, I'm going to let you out of your commitment and kind of go from there. So my returning players, they were going to graduate that COVID year. And so basically we started, as soon as COVID ended, we had to start all over. But what I decided to do during that COVID year was to try to figure out what was my coaching, like what did I want to do as a coach? One of the coaches that I reached out to when I first got the job is, you got to figure out what is your style, right? Like how do you want to be a coach, right? And so then that's what I really started to research. And this is one of the reasons why I thought I liked your podcast, because I had to figure out my why, And so I decided to, I don't even know how I reached out, but it was basically 3-dimensional coaching. And I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's from the Fellowship of Christian Athletes,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And they have this program. I forget which university it was, but it's called 3-dimensional coaching. And it's just it was just a group of coaches getting together every morning. And we were just kind of talking about, what exactly does it mean to be a coach, right? What is our goal? And, originally when I first started coaching at Century, I was like, look, I just don't want to get embarrassed. I want to make sure, right, that we had a decent enough team that we could kind of put up a fight. Because when I first started teaching at Century, I would go to a soccer game and I would go to a softball game. And I just remember like these students, it would be such a bad experience. And like at halftime or in the second inning, kids would actually just grab their gear and leave.
Just want to leave. Yeah.
Just leave because they were so bad. You know what I mean? And I'm like, that would just be embarrassing. So like, I was so focused on that, but then the more we talked, and then, one thing that really stuck out to me is, what is the definition of a coach? And so we discussed it, and the definition of a coach is literally what we were thinking, right? It's a horse-drawn carriage that takes very important people from point A to point B.
Point B. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so I'm like, oh yeah, that's what a coach is, right? So I'm meeting with a bunch of freshmen that are coming in, right? I get to go and take them from where they are to start, and then I get to when they graduate, right? So point A to point B. And that's kind of how I thought about it for a bit. So that's where I went. So I recruited like crazy. I got a kid from France. I got it because this was all done via internet, right? So there was no playing. So I got a kid from Idaho. I got a couple of local girls. So I got 4 recruits that year. And then everybody else was walk-ons. And so like you said, we made it regionals that year, but we didn't quite get enough to get over the top, Right. And then what I learned from that season was, man, it really has nothing to do with me, right? As a coach, you always feel like, I could do this or I could do that, And then I quickly realized, right, for me to think that I can take a very important person from point A to point B is kind of foolish, right? Because they did the work, right? So in my mentality changed in terms of what my definition of a coach is. My definition of a coach is I get to meet you at point A and I get to walk with you on this journey, and then hopefully you teach me as much as I teach you. More than likely, you're going to teach me a lot more than I teach you, and so from that point A to point B. And so for me, that's the definition of a coach, and so that's kind of where I went. And so for me, after that year, I really decided that I really don't, while winning does make it fun, I am a competitive person. Winning masks a lot of problems, right? Like we know that, but I also say that, what, I don't want to focus on the winning, right? If we focus on the things, we work hard, right? If we are in it for each other, right? The winning will come,
absolutely.
So
just
my baseball
byproduct.
Oh yeah, exactly. My baseball coach, he was telling me about a book he was reading, and So there's a Sanskrit term called mudita, M-U-D-I-T-A, and I was like, okay, so I wanted to learn more, and it's kind of something that I use for my teams is it's abundant joy for someone else's success, even if it doesn't benefit you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so in terms of athletes, that's what I'm looking for, right? In volleyball, it's that way, the middle sometimes, right? Like the middle never touches the ball, right? Like she goes up for a block, she kind of funnels it, so that's her job, and then, there's an amazing dig by the DS, and then it's set by the setter, and then the outside buries the ball, right? And it's exciting, everyone's celebrating, but the middle didn't get to touch the ball at all. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Or the other DS didn't touch the ball at all. But you get to celebrate your teammates, and that's the joy of the game, and so that's kind of where I figure if we focus on those things, right, the winning has been happening. So I'm not sure if that's if we just get really good athletes because I'm focused on something else other than winning, or maybe because we are focused on each other, the winning comes, like you said, like a byproduct. So
I think, obviously I'm kind of speaking from an outside source here, of course. Right. Like as we have just mentioned, winning, right, is a byproduct, which then helps, maybe intrigues or makes athletes of good caliber want to go there, right? Cause they want to win. Or they want to find success too, right? So like I think that matters too. But I think also, which we'll get into in a little bit about like the culture side of it, but if they feel like they're walking into a good culture, whether it is the winning side or like based off of the interactions they have with you, which we'll get into recruiting as well, but like if they feel like they can go into a place that's, for one, they can be comfortable, but also almost like a home, right? They kind of feel a family feel. They don't feel like they're just a number, essentially. And that could be institution-wide or just program-wise. I think that it really does make a difference, I would assume, when it comes to, an athlete deciding to go there. And then obviously, right, like it's easier for them to buy into whatever you're speaking on or whatever the institutions, what they're trying to get with their athletes to, or their students, I should say. So I think it all just kind of spirals down from a good interaction. And obviously, like you said, right, winning helps too. But I think it's all a big... It all works together, right? This thing helps here, this helps here, this helps here, which then all brings that nucleus to, become something in a sense. And like I said, I want to talk about recruiting, but I guess my question for you is you said that you went to some of these, like you said, with the Federation of Fellow Christian Athletes, basically, right? And you had some of those meetings and you went to all these clinics and stuff. So trust me, I guess my question for you is, and this could be a question you answer based maybe on the mentor side, right? Like some of these things you learned from them, or maybe when you were just playing in sports growing up, right? Whatever the case is. But who was, so maybe who was an influential coach or person to you? And then the second part of this is, what is one thing that you've taken, that you've implemented into your program, maybe kind of on the game schematic practice drill side, right? However you want to do, like on the actual on court side, and then maybe behind the scenes side. So maybe it's like the social interactions or the how you talk to an athlete, relationships, or however you want to take that, right? So kind of one thing schematically practice game on court, and then one thing off court.
Right. Yeah. I mean, definitely. I think in terms of like that mentorship, I'm constantly like wanting to learn, but if we just go back to where everything originated for me, right? I had a former Air Force retiree. He was my volleyball coach, and he was one of my really good friends' dad. And so I think there was, we learn from our coaches, right? We either do like, we coach like we were coached, or we coach opposite of how we were coached. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so I will say, as a high school kid, things that you do remember, right? Like I do remember like how personal he was, right? Like that attention that he gave to each individual, right? That was something that I really admired. The part that kind of stuck out that I'm doing opposite of him is just his intensity, right? And that desire to win, and he used to say something to us all the time. And even as a, 16-year-old kid, I remember thinking this in my head, right? And when we would be losing a game and he'd be like, if you did everything I told you, we would be winning this game. And I wanted to be like,
interesting.
If we did everything you told us, we'd be in the Olympics, right? Like, right? Just because.
I mean, that's fair though. I mean, there's youth coaches who teach, 8, 10-year-olds, and they expect it. I guess they treat them and talk to them like they're college athletes, right? But they're 8, 9, 10, 12 years old, which obviously you can start. There's obvious things you have to have as a standard or as an expectation, but there's also kind of that level of understanding, partially also knowing your crowd, right? Like knowing your athletes, knowing what they're capable of individually or as a team. I guess I just had to throw that in there, but I think that's important, right? So like like you said, if we did everything you said, we would be representing Team Japan or Team whomever, right?
Yeah.
Wherever that person, whatever you are at the time, or I should say whoever's listening, right? Team Mexico, Team Belgium, whatever. So I think it's important for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, but he was very influential in my life, I mean, he taught me to love the game. He taught me that, how important it was to be on team, so those were the positives, but from here, as I keep growing and learning, and I want to meet different coaches, So the one guy, while we don't always see eye to eye in terms of our philosophy, right? But the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, by a fellow by the name of Ron Backus, he was a track coach, and he was an elite athlete. He was he was an Olympic alternate when he was younger. You know what I mean?
Okay.
To do track, and so then I kind of got that. Like, what does it mean to be a coach, and what do I want to focus on? And so he taught me that we focus on the person, right? We focus on the athlete. We don't focus on the actual sport,
Right.
Like, and so if we can build these people up, like kind of what you said at the beginning of your intro there, I mean, that's what our goal is,
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I get 2 years with them, and my job is to kind of help them be better after those 2 years,
Right.
And then now that I'm more into the volleyball aspect of it, right, I'm constantly, just trying to seek out, right, what's the newest, right? What's the best way to do it? And I like numbers. And so, USA Volleyball, they have a number of different clinics, they have a lot of coaches. And then again, it's one of those things where when I signed up, I just like the numbers. And so when I design my defensive strategies, or my offensive strategies, I base it off of what's consistent. Watch a lot of international games, you watch a lot of professional matches now, even high level volleyball, right? Where does the ball land most of the time? And that's where I want my defense to be. And so that's kind of like so gold medal squared is one that's kind of known in the volleyball world. Some people love it, some people a little bit less so.
Right.
It's kind of a copycat league, right? Like some people say, hey, that works for them. That's what we're going to do, right? But again, like you said, if we don't have the athletes to run that system, you can't run that system. You have to adjust, And for me, I'm not one of those coaches that says, this is the way, this is my way, right? Like I will be the last person to tell you I know everything there is about this game, right? I just know that, hey, we have to make adjustments, So if we play a defense where we leave the deep corners free, and they keep hitting that deep corner, we're going to have to change our defense,
Absolutely.
So when we do our practices, I teach them multiple formations, so we can kind of play that. And we have to be flexible in that way. That's our defensive philosophy. Our offensive philosophy is, like I said, I grew up in Japan, and I love the pace at which the international game is played. And so, I try to run it as fast as we can. I know some people are like, that's not safe, but I was like, well, we can do it in a safe manner. You know what I mean? Because that is the one area, right? Let's say it's just reckless. Somebody goes flying into the net or somebody jumps up. lands on one leg and momentum carries her and she tears her ACL. Like those are some problems, you know what I mean? So I know why some people would avoid it. But at our level, at the junior college Division III level, right? If we can be faster than our opponents, we're going to be a lot more successful, you know?
I like that. Yeah. Well, I think that it's like you said, you have to make adjustments, and I think we have to evolve in general. And I think I say this more than I probably should, just because it probably is a repetitive record for everybody who listens to this all the time. But like, we have to evolve as coaches, and I think that especially as you in-game changes in management, and I haven't really spoke on that, but I think is huge for probably any and every sport. And that's why, like, halftime in football, right, or halftime at basketball, whatever. In our case, right, like in freestyle, when you get to the high level of wrestling, that halftime is crucial for, like, all right, what do we need to change to put us in better positions? So I can appreciate that you have these different options if necessary, right, and can teach these young athletes to go and evolve, right? And it teaches them life lessons too. Like, life's not going to be stagnant, right? We have to be able to change on the fly, whatever it is. So I like that. I love that for sure. So you said, and I love that you mentioned about, like, the 2-year thing, right? As a JUCO. So as a 2-year thing, right? Like, I've heard you're almost like a trampoline, right, to the next level. Some girls may want to go to the 4-year, some girls may not, right? It all just depends on where they stand in their life and their goals. But, like, how do you develop an athlete, as you mentioned, from point A to point B, right, to become maybe they come in as a freshman, and maybe, you know, especially now that you're starting to get that, maybe not the beginning, but now you're starting to see where you can kind of recruit where you want, at least relative, right? And a freshman who comes in may not see the court as much, unless, you know, whatever the case is, but they may not see the court as much. So how do you develop that person who walks in point A and then develop them to where maybe end of season year 1, or specifically going into year 2, that not only are they able to be a starter or be in rotation, because I know you have subs and movement and stuff, but also if they chose to go to a 4-year or, you know, to the next level after that, that they're able to compete and be ready for that type of leap as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. So one of the things that I actively try is I try to keep my roster pretty small. You know,
okay.
It's sometimes not a great thing. Like this last season, I had an ankle sprain, I had a concussion, right? And then all of a sudden, we were down 2 players and an Achilles injury. So we're out of our 12, we had 9 healthy bodies. And that makes it a little bit hard, you know, to play volleyball sometimes, especially during practices and that nature. So it's not necessarily a great, you know, place to be. But I also believe that I'm competing, you know, trying to recruit these athletes to come to a 2-year when they have offers to go to a 4-year, you know, and what are the benefits of going to a 2-year program, right? And when it comes to volleyball, I believe that one of the biggest benefits is you actually get playing time. You know what I mean? If you were a freshman on a roster of 22, you know, your first year at the 4-year level, you probably don't get that experience, you know? And so I'm going back to my blocked versus random training. You know what I mean? Like random training is during a game. What happens during a game, you might never, ever see again. You know what I mean? And so we need that. And so I want them to have that experience, you know? So that's why I try to keep my roster fairly small. You know, I do hold one of the smallest rosters in our conference. And that's on purpose, not because I can't find athletes. It's just because I don't need a bunch of athletes, because the more athletes you have, well, now all of a sudden people are like, hey, well, I came to a junior college because I thought I was going to get more playing time. And if they're not getting playing time, then that's when all the conversation starts to begin. You know, but I also do believe in, you know, that clear is kind, you know, and I will be very honest with you. I never promise an athlete when I'm recruiting them that I will guarantee them a spot on the team or a starting spot, right? I don't know. I can't get, there's certain things that I can't control, right? I can't control how they're going to play when they get here. I can't control, you know, I can't say that we're going to win our region, you know, because I have no idea what the other teams look like, you know? So like, we can't promise these things, but what I can promise you is I will be extremely honest with you, and I will give you an absolute fair shot at playing, you know what I mean? If you put in the work. But we have numbers, we have stats, right? And, the stats tell me everything,
Yeah.
Gold Medal Square does a really good job. We have like these positional battles that we call it.
Okay.
And so even like during the preseason, like I'll put in like, so let's say our outside hitters, right? And I have 3 outside hitters. Well, you know what? I'm going to put them all in there, right? With the same 5 that they're playing with.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And then when they are in the game, do they score more points for us or do they score more points for the other team? And
interesting.
That will tell us, right? And you know what? Like sometimes it's funny because our best athlete might not score very many points, right? And because there's, in athletics, there's so much more than just skill, right? Those intangibles,
Absolutely.
right? Like how comfortable are your teammates with you, right? Do they trust that you're going to be there? Do they know what you're doing and you're going to be, or it's okay for them to be a little bit more loose. If they make a mistake, they know you're going to make that ball better, right?
Yeah.
Also, you know what I mean? It's all these intangibles.
That chemistry.
That chemistry is important, right? And I think that as we go, or I should say, as a program grows and as you get these athletes, right? Like I do think that that's super important for, I guess I don't even know how to put it in words because you did a really good job of explaining like how important that is. But I can appreciate that that's something that you do as a coach, right? Is like as you're recruiting these girls and athletes in general, you're not promising anything because you never know, right? Development, which I just talked about, right? Like they could be, and I don't know what your intangibles are, which probably I might ask you in a little bit when you're looking for an athlete, but like they might look great on paper in high school, but they get to college and different things, right? Play factor, and grades, which I don't know if necessarily makes a difference as a fall sport. I mean, maybe right out of high school it matters. I don't know if you have standards throughout the season. I'm sure you do. But like some of those things vary, right? And when it comes to these promises that you can do, and so you just don't want to produce false promises, right? Because that looks bad on not only trust for future, but I think also just like I would assume kind of like morally, like you're just saying something to get the athlete here when realistically dang well that's not going to be something, at least not right off the bat, right? Unless something changes. So I can appreciate that you keep that honest conversation when recruiting. I like that.
And then also during the season, you know what I mean? Like, just give you an example from last year. I had an All-American setter. It was her second year. And then I had a freshman setter who had just gorgeous hands. She could set the game. She was athletic and everything like that. And she really struggled during the season because she was playing behind this All-American setter, And I mean, at a junior college, you only got 2 years, Yeah. And she wasn't beating out the setter, the sophomore setter. And so she would come up to me after practices and she was super sweet kid. She's never going to say anything bad about her teammate or anything like that. But just asking questions like, hey, what can I do to get more playing time, or what can I do to get on the court, And it's a difficult conversation to have, but we need to be honest as coaches, right? And I always say, hey, look, well, most people are getting better, right? Like you are getting better, but so is your teammate, and it's a hard thing sometimes for kids to understand, especially coming out of high school where they were the starting whatever, right?
They were that person,
player, And I'm like, you guys have to understand that out of all the kids that play college volleyball or high school volleyball, right? All the girls that play high school volleyball, only about 5.9% play in college. Mm-hmm. Right? So you think about all those kids.
Of course, yeah, huge. Yeah, it's a huge scrub together, yeah.
And I guess that's in general, right? Like I think it's like 7% as all sports collectively, right? Like does that. So it's definitely hard for a high school kid to wrap their head around like they went from the guy or from the girl to now they're just no one say another number, but like they're part of this person's also that guy or girl. So is she, so is she, so is she, So exactly. It makes a difference mentally for them to adjust, which I think like I'm going to ask this, I think, before we get into the recruiting side of it, because I wanted to ask it earlier, but I forgot. But I think it's very important, and I'm very intrigued. So I mentioned earlier, like, you went to the Final Four, right? You went to the national tournament on the level of finding success, right? And you made it to the final game, and we lost, right? We made it we were runner-up. So how do you transition as a coach and maybe as a program the next year, whenever you go to and you have a huge, breakout year, or you've seen the success change, right? You went from region champs to now you made Final Four to now you made the title game, and then we didn't make it. Obviously our ultimate goal, quote unquote, right? Obviously there's deeper than this, but wins and losses, our ultimate goal is to win that natty, right? So like, how do you transition and how do you go for the next week, the next year to continue those same aspirations? But like, does that make sense? Like, how do you what's the mindset and how do you go to the next year and to bring those spirits back up, especially those freshmen maybe who were a part of that loss?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example, right? So when we lost in regionals my first year, was it 2022? 2021, right?
Yep.
We lost in regionals. The national tournament wasn't actually too far from here. We didn't make the national tournament, and I basically told myself, I need to see what I need to recruit, right? I need to see what kind of athlete are we talking about. And so I went and I paid my own way. I got a hotel, drove to the tournament, and I just kind of watched the athletes. And I'm like, okay, like they're a lot better than we are currently, but they're not unattainable. You know what I mean? Like in my mind, I'm like, okay, these are the athletes I need to go after, right? Because when you're recruiting athletes, you're always just kind of like, oh, she's gonna say no for sure,
right?
Because she wants to go play on another level, and so. So we kind of like, but at the very beginning, I was very like not confident, and so I'm just kind of like, eh. So, but after watching that, I basically said, hey, look, I can't keep doing the way that I do it, So my mentality went in after that year saying, I need to replace whoever's leaving with somebody better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Whether it be a better personality, a better fit, or a better athlete. And so we kind of have to go with that mindset. So then the following year, that's the year that we made it to the semifinals,
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, wow, I was not expecting this. Like, it just like lightning in a bottle. I got like 3 kids that were freaking fantastic. And, I'm just like, wow, this is insane. Like, this is the best it's going to get. Like we lose in the semifinals, the team that eventually won the whole thing, which, hey, whatever, all right.
Right.
So fine, let's go. Let's do it. And then the year of the national runner-up, like I got better players. I just got better players, and all of a sudden I'm feeling really good. We make it to the national championship. We run into this crazy powerhouse team from Dallas, and we get ramrodded. And now you're like, oh. I was going to lose a lot of players. I lost my All-American setter. I lost my, my All-Conference right side, and I'm like, oh boy, and I'm like, well, maybe this is the best year it's going to be. And then this last season, honestly, talent-wise, I thought we had, if not the same, maybe a little bit better than the previous year, and so we make it back to the national tournament, and we make it to the semifinals, only to lose to that same exact Dallas team again. Right? That same exact Dallas team who returned their entire starting roster, who had basically all Americans up and down the roster,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And and I talked to the coach, and I'm like, it's just that area. They got 9 million
Dallas,
kids in
DFW,
that Dallas area, and they don't want to leave home. So it's great. It's great for their program.
Easy. Yeah.
And so, so for me, like, how do we continue to build on that? You know what I mean? Like, so that's 3 years in a row now. We made the national tournament, 3 years in a row now that we made a Final Four. And, it's always going to be somebody different. They keep losing. I keep losing them, right? If I had them for 4 years, they have that build, right? But we lose them I'm recruiting 8 athletes every year. And so the goal is to try to find athletes that, that just want to buy into what we're trying to build here. And then, we might not have the best athletes, but if we have the right mentality, the right cohesion, right, we can win a lot of matches,
For sure.
And so I'm busy at work trying to replace all the graduates, and this year I've had the most amount of athletes leaving and playing on than I ever had. A lot of times when they graduate, a lot of them are like, you know what, I think we're done. Like it doesn't get any better than this, right? We made it to the national championship game. Like I could transfer, but then, they're not, they're not D1 athletes, right? They're not D2 athletes, they're D3 athletes. So they're like, do I really want to go and enter that D3 world again, which is even more competitive, right? At least at the NJCAA level, there's only 100 some teams, whereas if you go to the NCAA level, the D3 level, I mean, it's insane how many teams there are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think there was like 1,000 between all levels of competition. Yeah, so there's a lot of volleyball, that's for sure. Yeah, and I think that I like that you said that you're always trying to improve and always try to get better, right? And bring in better talent, whatever it is, relation. So like you said, personally, right, as a person or as an athlete. So, oh, by the way, I appreciate you answering that because I think that's huge, right? People who might be, I think every team who's found that success who might have lost that, especially if it is a 4-year or even in this case it's a 2-year, like in some cases it's hard to get back there, right? You never know when you'll get back there again. So you've kind of made 3 straight years of a good run, and so now you kind of know the at least recipe to get there. We just have to find a way to get over that hurdle, right? So that leads to that recruiting question of, I guess, perfect segue into your recruiting. So you mentioned earlier how you find athletes, you had an athlete from San Antonio, you found Paris, you've kind of found all over Idaho. So essentially you're not afraid to reach out more than just Minnesota, which is interesting because I know D3 JUCO, I believe, does not offer athletic scholarships. I could be wrong, but I believe you don't. So like, for one, where are you finding your athletes? So it looks like you're looking all over. It's like, where are you finding them? And then like, how are you getting them to commit to you, knowing that you can't offer certain things that maybe even a D1 JUCO or even like an AI school might be able to come in and offer, right? So like, how are they saying yes to you, and then where are you finding them?
Honestly, this is one area where I am extremely grateful. Like, I mean, I cannot express it enough, how grateful I am for my athletes. Because you are correct. We are a D3 JUCO. We do not offer any sort of aid, athletically, and so, it's just one of those things where, so my process is this, right? I start out in the Minnesota area because I always find that it makes sense for the reasons why you would go to a community college is because it's in your community. You can still live at home, and it's a little bit cheaper than going to university. That's kind of my philosophy on that. What I'm running into problems with is sometimes that we, as a junior college, there's 2 things. One, it could just be like this mentality, right? A lot of people say, no, you don't want to go to a 2-year, and I always wanted, when I approach a coach and I say, hey, I'm interested in this athlete, can you share a little bit more information about her? And then the coach goes, she's not junior college material. And then I'm always kind of like, I really bite my tongue, but what I really want to say is, what exactly does that mean? Right? Does it mean she's too smart to go to a junior college? Does she have too much money to go to a junior college? Or is she just too good of a volleyball player to go to junior college? You know what I mean? And right. I'm like, what exactly do you mean? Like, why are you taking that opportunity away just for her to make her own decision? Because you just never know, right? Like, we are a tech, we have tech programs, right? If you want to major in cosmetology, if you want to major in rad tech, if you want to major in dental dental system, you know what I mean?
Your certificate you don't, stuff,
you don't need to go to a 4-year. So why are you taking that away from her if that's something direction that she wants to go? But again, I can kind of go on and on about that, right? But what I do notice is a lot of our high school kids in the area here, they do what we call PSEO, so post-secondary education option. And so a lot of them will actually be taking college classes while they're in high school, right? So a lot of the kids that I reach out to, some of them basically already got their 2-year by the time they're done with high school. You know what I mean? And so it's really difficult to get those kids, in the area to come to Century, And so now I use those recruiting sites, and now I'm looking all over the place, right? Because I'm like, okay,
NCSA and stuff.
Yeah, NCSA. I look at field level. I look at sports recruits. And then one of the reasons why I coach club volleyball is because they had me going around to all these different tournaments. And so when I'm at the different tournaments, I'm recruiting. You know what I mean? So like I kind of double dip a little bit, but it's, I mean, it's just a lot of work, because I mean, I only have 12 players. So all I need is like 3, right?
Yeah,
if I get 3,
right.
If I can get 3 stars, I mean, we're going to be solid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, but that's kind of where we're at in terms of that recruiting. I'm constantly kind of like, turning stones, trying to find somebody. And I find that the biggest thing is if you stay true, I don't know if you ever watched Coach's Playbook.
I have, yeah.
Yeah. I forget which one it was, but that hold fast, stay true.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. I have heard that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, for me, I'm just like, you know what, this is what's working. I just have to believe in the process. Yeah. Right now, we're already in March and my roster's only at 9. I'm still looking for 3 studs,
I got you.
And I know a lot of my colleagues are like, you're crazy. You need to get your roster filled, and I'm like, I'm not just looking to fill a roster. I'm trying to build a championship team here,
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so, yeah, it's just kind of one of those things. Go ahead.
No, you're good. I was going to say, like, I think that, like you said about, some coaches taking away the opportunity. My biggest thing is education, right? Like, I feel like as a high school coach, my job is to at least on layman's terms, right, talking to a high school kid, letting them know all the options and what each level will give opportunity wise, right? Like, and some of it is also kind of keeping them, which granted, it's not my place to tell them where they can go, because if they're going to get recruited, I think personally, let's just say like they're no higher than a D2 or even no higher than like a NAI in D3, but then like a D2 comes in, like, oh great, like, okay, maybe I was wrong. So it's not my place to tell them where they can and can't go, but it's more of like educating each level, right? Of like, hey, JUCO's here and up the chain. But I think another really big area, which I don't know if you use this or you plan on using it or whatever the case is, especially maybe to find those studs who maybe want to go to a 4-year school, is that JUCO change, right? Where they get 2 years and then they still get that 4-year eligibility at the next level, right? So they could go to that D2 or wherever that leads them to. So like, I don't know if that's going to be, I don't know if you use that. I know it's the first year, but like, I think that's going to be so specifically, maybe not. I mean, if they know their JUCOs and their levels and the high school coach are doing their job, everybody will know. But if they don't know, I feel like that's a really big selling tool for some of these studs that you're trying to get in here who are going to be those stars and high level athletes. Tell them, no, hey, this is truly just like so you don't have to, whatever your pitch is, but you don't have to wait 2-3 years to see the court at this school. You come in, boom, boom, boom here, and then you still get your 4 years. So like, I think that's going to be huge for the JUCO level of all athletics.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. I've been trying to find that language. You know what I mean? I've been looking for the NCAA. Before I start to mention that in part of my recruiting pitch, I want to learn more about that, right? Like I know right now in that scenario, it worked for that particular athlete. Football at Vanderbilt. I think it was Vanderbilt, right? I can't remember which school.
Yeah, Diego Pavia. Yeah, he's actually from New Mexico. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
he's from here, but yeah.
Yeah, so I want to see the NCAA, like I want to see the actual language saying that that's a legit real thing. You know what I mean? Right now I'm hearing like, okay, it works if you are in that situation, then yeah. But you know what I mean? So I want to know once the NCAA gets their stuff together, be like, yep, this is the case. Then man, gloves are going to come off, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, so I mean, I would love to have that kind of opportunity, But yeah, so I mean, just like you said, it's about education, right? So when I meet with athletes, usually it just starts out with like what we're doing right now, like a Zoom call, especially the ones that obviously aren't in the area. And basically I tell them, look, my job isn't necessarily to recruit them to come to Century, right? My job is to share what a 2-year experience looks like. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So they can get all the information. So when they make their decision, whether it be a 4-year or a 2-year, they can go back and say, hey, no regrets. And that's the way I leave it out. It's like, look, whatever you decide, don't ever look back, right? You could, shoulda, coulda, woulda all day, right? Yep. When you make your decision, that's your decision. That's the best for you. You know what I mean? Yep. And so again, my job isn't to to sell them on Century. My job is to share them what it looks like to play volleyball for Century and go to school at Century. You know?
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I really say to them is what you have to think about is fit versus flash, right? Like, you know, I had an athlete that when she was transferring out, she's like, I really want to play for a D1 program. I was like, so you want to play for a really bad D1 program, like a low-level D1 program who has like one win? Because that's where you're at. That's who's interested in you. Or you want to play for a better D1 program but sit on their bench and be, you know, more of a practice player? Right? Is that what you're looking for? Like, if that's what you're looking for, you know, if that's the fit that you're looking for, you know, but if you're looking for that flash saying that you were a D1 athlete, then I don't know if you're going to be happy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that's totally up to you. So I said, if the fit is right, that's where you should go, you know? And the second thing is always people over places. You know, I have one athlete says, I want to go play in Florida. I was like, yeah, but, you know, what if the people aren't no good there? Yeah, you want to go to a program that actually has a good group of coaches, a good group of teammates, right? So those are those things that we kind of discuss. And so, like you said, it's just about an education. You know, I'm just kind of an extension of a recruiter, you know, a coach, because I don't want to convince a kid to come to Century only to be felt like they got lied to. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm going to be very honest with them. You know, do I believe that we are the best education you could possibly get at the 2-year level? I can't say that I do. You know, I think post-COVID, I don't know very many higher education programs that I feel very confident about. You know what I mean? I know that's kind of hard to say and sad to say as a college instructor myself, you know, but I mean, you know, I know
it's changed. Yeah. It's changed.
Yeah. The landscape has changed so much. So it's hard to sell. Like I'm going to be very honest with them. You know, I'm like, what's your major? Do we have your major? And do I believe that you're going to get the most out of your education by coming here?
And that, I think, and it's just having like everything you just mentioned is literally just a conversation, right? And like, regardless, like obviously you want the athlete to go to your school, but at the same time, you want it to be the best. Like you're looking out for them as an athlete in their best interest, regardless if they come to you or not, right? And that's the other thing too, which I mean, I would assume could be wrong because I don't know how it necessarily works. But like, let's say the athlete does want to go to a 4-year school, right off the bat, and like that first year they don't have a great. It's not good for them. It's bad fit, bad whatever situations, whatever. But they really liked you as between you and somebody else. Like they may still want to come back to you if you have a roster spot, of course. And I know every sport's different, so that might not be the case. Every coach is different. But the idea is like that relationship that you built because they trusted you and what you said, right, can always come back potentially within a time frame, of course, that to help them kind of still be that you could still be that person for them and help them get to their ultimate goal again. You know, because they might have, like you said, even though there's no woulda, shoulda, coulda, which they'll probably say, Coach, I shoulda went to you, whatever. But the idea is like, you know, that relationship is still strong to where you could still be a benefit to them, whether it's a coaching program or just the institution, right? So I think it's big.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting place to be. You know what I mean? Because we are a 2-year, right? Let's say they chose a 4-year, they already used up a year of eligibility, so they would only be able to come to us for 1 more year. You know what I mean? And so that's you know, would I say no to that? Not necessarily, right? Like like you said, I keep my roster fairly small, and if this was some kid that I really wanted, you know, we definitely have a conversation. But I think the biggest conversation would be, you know, it's even beyond like sports, right? Like, I want to know, why are you leaving?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I find that, especially now with the transfer portal, right? It's so difficult, you know. And I have my own personal beliefs about it. But for me, the biggest thing is
topic for another time.
Yeah, exactly. Are we leaving because it got hard? Right? Are we leaving because we weren't getting playing time? Right? Why? You know what I mean? Like, there's definitely going to be instances where you get homesick, right? You know, where you know the major that you're trying to get into isn't quite working. The fit isn't quite right. You know?
Yeah.
But if it's about, you know, like there's certain things where I'm just like,
Yeah, there's red flags that you're kind of paying attention to. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. If you're leaving because you're not getting playing time, I'm like, you're a freshman on a university team. You'd have to be ridiculously good to outplay that senior or outplay that junior.
And in today's world, right, it could be fifth or sixth year senior.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It could be way deeper too. So, but at the same time though, right, like that's another thing. Like do your due diligence as an athlete to like look at their roster and see where they sit, or even ask the coach straight up, like, Coach, where do you see me? How your seniors looking, or whatever? Because I think that's important conversation as well. Even maybe for you, it's like, hey, if they're coming in, like, hey, I have X amount of girls graduating, right, or whatever, right? If you have a girl who's, which I guess in your case maybe not that big of a deal, but like, or excuse me, maybe not like as much because you have a sophomore, a junior, and a fifth year senior. Like that's three girls in your position that can make a difference versus in your position, right, and your small roster, it might be one or two, and they're both sophomores this year. So that could definitely play a factor into, that mentality as an athlete, I would assume, so I'm on the back half. I have like 4 questions left for you. They're going to be my favorite questions. We'll get you out of here. I know you're stopped at the coffee shop for the snowstorm, which hopefully it's kind of cleared by a little bit, so it's a little bit safe for you to go home. But I love these questions. This is the back half, and finding that you've had success, which you've kind of dove into some of this stuff. But my favorite, or we'll start with this question here, is how do you build a successful culture on the level of buy-in and mindset? And I think this is intriguing to me specifically because, as we've mentioned, 2-year school, they're in and out realistically, right? It goes faster than you think. And so, like, how do you build that in general, but also maybe in such a short time to find, like we said, that chemistry or whatever that culture leads to?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is like I said before, right? It has nothing to do with me. It's the leadership on the team. I basically set out a blueprint. I was like, hey, this is what I want my team to look like. These are like the non-negotiables, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like at the beginning of every practice, or beginning of the season, we get up on the board. So John Dunning, the former coach at Stanford, went to a clinic and he was talking about, he had this board that basically said that these are the 10 things that your teammates can't stand. And so we basically made a list of 10 things, right? And so we know that our teammates don't like these 10 things, so we're not going to do those 10 things. And so we just have a conversation, we write it on the board, we take a picture of it, I put it in the notebook, and basically be like, all right, anytime any of you guys do any of these things, I'm just going to point to this list. No, we're not going to say anything.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just basically say, hey, these are those non-negotiables. But the last few years, right, I've just had ridiculously good leaders. What you find that one leader that buys in, she's going to get everybody else on board, And I mean, so my player from Idaho, right? I mean, she was ridiculous in terms of just the culture and, her buy-in and her effort. And then because she was here, then the freshman, the All-American setter came. She saw that. She emulated that. She loved it. She took it on the following year, and so it's just been like a torch that's been passed down. You know what I mean? And so, again, it's just like, I'd love to take credit for it, but it really has nothing to do with me. Right? The biggest thing is just trying to find those kids that this is their perfect fit. Again, whatever the reason is that you come to a junior college, right? Whether it be because it's cheaper, whether it's because you need to mature a little bit more, or whether it's because your grades weren't great in high school, or whatever, right? Like everybody's got a different journey, and if we can be here for that, that's the goal. But in terms of how do we get that, that's just the players, having the right players,
having them be the, what do they say? Teams that are led by their, athlete-led teams, right, is where you find a lot of that culture. So I love that. You get lucky and it just passes down. So I like that you're also humble enough to not take necessarily all the credit, right? Obviously, you can take the credit of getting the girls in and having a good foundation and standard. But, yeah, after that, having them bring it down is all up to them, right? So I love that. So then, how do you build a successful program on the level of wins, and then how do you sustain that over time?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking this the other day, right? When you lose your All-Americans every year, you know what I mean? I've lost All-American after All-American after All-American, and I'm just like, I might not get another All-American. Like, how in the world is this going to happen? And so, my biggest thing is I'm not recruiting because I want to win, right? For me, like I said, it's always been about my players. And so, because I have returning freshmen, I have 4 returning freshmen this year, right? And they had such a really positive experience in terms of wins and losses. I really like work really hard, right? Because I don't want to disappoint them, right? They committed to me, so I'm committed to them, and so I'm working really hard to replace the athletes that leave with similar, if not better, athletes or better people. You know, and so. Can I guarantee it? I don't know, right? Like, especially when I'm recruiting out of Texas or when I'm recruiting out, I've only seen video. I've never actually seen them play, you know, and then I'm recruiting them after a few conversations via Zoom or FaceTime, right? Like I can see, and everyone says the right things, but we won't really know until they actually get here what kind of person they really will be. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so we kind of take a chance at it. They take a chance at us to move all the way up here. But we also take a chance on them, be like, hey, I from what on my communication with you, I really believe that you have the right mindset and the right culture. So it's everyone just being willing to take a chance and everyone listening and just being patient with each other, really.
Right.
But
so
just working hard.
Yeah, no, working hard. And I think that, and I've heard this, but as a college coach, like recruiting's your like the coaching side of it's the fun part, but recruiting's the 9 to 5, right? And that's where a lot of it comes into. So like, how many phone calls are you doing, or as you mentioned, Zoom calls? Like, for example, like I know you probably have a recruiting board of, let's say you might have 100 girls you're looking at, and you're obviously narrowing it down to 9, 10, 6, however many you need that year. But like, let's say when you narrow it down, how many phone calls are you doing on average to each one of these athletes to get them to get to the final point of like, all right, I want to commit to you, or I want to give you an offer, or come out to a visit, or wherever you are in that spiral time frame?
Yeah, so you're right. Like my list is quite long, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not only like reaching out to the athletes that we want, but we also need to find athletes that actually want to come to a junior college. You know what I mean? Like there's been a number of times where I'll reach out to athletes and they're like, I was looking for a 4-year experience. And that's one of my very first pitches is like, look, I can't offer you that 4-year experience, right? That dorm life that, we have we have these apartments that are right next door that you kind of have that feel, but it's not the same, right? Not the same as, going from, your dorm to the classroom together, all of that.
The CAF and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. If you're looking for that, I was like, we're not your spot, but it is different, right? Like trying to recruit that. Now I just real blank. What was that question again?
Oh no, you're good. It was just more of a like, how many phone calls are you doing on average to each one of these athletes?
So my list is quite long, and I get to about maybe 3 or 4 phone calls a week to different athletes. And then after those calls, I approach things a little bit differently, because like I said, we're in March now and I'm still looking for players. And I've come to the acceptance that we are not number one on a lot of people's list. You know what I mean? We are plan B, right? If this doesn't work out, if I don't get this offer, then I'll go to a junior college, And I'm like, you know what? If you're that good of an athlete, I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? And so, so whenever I finish my call, I was like, look, I want you, right? If I have a spot for you, I'll take you whenever you want to come, but I also am very straightforward with them and in the manner of, hey, this is the biggest decision you've ever had to make in your life up until now, right? Like this is the next 4 years of your life, and you're going to need to talk to your parents, you need to talk to your friends, you need to talk to whoever, to make your decision. And you don't need me calling you every week saying, hey, have you made up your mind? Hey, have you made up your mind?
Yeah,
hey,
absolutely.
You know what I mean? I was like, again, that's just I just find that irritating. And so I said to them, I'm like, just because I won't carry on this conversation with you doesn't mean that I don't want you. Right.
Yep.
I just need to give you space so you can make this decision on your own. And that's kind of my approach on it. Again, some of my colleagues think that I'm absolutely insane to do that. But at the same time, I'm just like, you know what, this is important to them. And I want to respect their decision, And so that's kind of where I am with that. So yes, I get a lot of calls. Sometimes I hear back, and sometimes I don't hear back from them at all, And every now and again, I will say that once, let's say I'm recruiting 3 outsides, and so if I sign one, I'll send them a text, say, hey, so out of my 3 spots that I had available, one of them is gone. So I have 2 left. Just let you know, I'm not trying to rush you or anything like that, but I'm just letting you know that if we start to run out, we are not going to be an option for you, know?
Right. I guess kind of, right? Like, you're not trying to rush them into it. You're obviously doing you're just keeping your due diligence of letting them know where you sit as the program. But by doing that, it also kind of maybe speeds up the process a little bit of them making a decision maybe. So that's fair. I like it. So then my favorite question of the podcast, I have 2 left. This one's the final philosophy, and then I have a fun one to end with. But as you have mentioned before, right, and you said you've had to find this before, but it's the name of the show is why do you coach?
Yeah, this is the fun one. When I got your email, I'm like, oh yeah, this is my jam right here. Like every year, you get done with the season, especially after your loss, right? Like there's only one team at the end of the season that's extremely happy, and that's the one that won the whole thing, right? Like to end on a loss always is kind of rough, And while it's difficult, right, at times, if you look back and you see the lives, that you were able to share, right, that is the why, right? Like with us at a junior college, I get a number of athletes that, for whatever reason, right, they're at the junior college level, right? Maturity, finances, things of that nature, but you get to continue to do what you love, and so for me, whenever I coach at this level, when I walk away, right, like I am recharged, I'm energized, right, because the athletes really just are fantastic. They're great people. We want to recruit good people, and so it makes it easy. So, so to be able to kind of share that experience with them, So I guess the simple answer would be, I'm looking for a community. I think that's something that we, post COVID now, like we really do lack that. And so to have something, right, where students can be like, hey, I'm majoring in this. I'm coming to a junior college. I don't know anybody. I'm going to join a volleyball team because I get to meet, people that I wouldn't have ever met, right? My first year or that post-COVID year where I had that girl from France and that girl from middle of nowhere, Idaho, and they were best friends, and they're going to be friends for the rest of their lives. That never happens, right? Like if they didn't both play volleyball,
you would never. You would never meet that person from France if you didn't play volleyball. Absolutely.
Exactly. So I think that's the why. I think the why is, hey, you know what? Can we do something that we love, and can we do it together? And then hopefully get to where we want to go down the road, in terms of your education. So
I like it. I love that. Yeah, I can appreciate that you're trying to build a community, and that might be the first one I've heard of saying building a community. So I really like that. Building a long-term family to where when you retire, you have hundreds of girls or athletes, right, that you influence, hopefully in a positive way, and all the things that you taught them, whether socially, athletically, whatever, or personally, they're able to benefit and use that in their life, being good wives, moms, just people, right, in general. So I love that. I love it. So I appreciate that, man. That was really, really good. If you guys are still listening to this, if you guys are on YouTube, make sure you guys HTB hit that bell, like, subscribe, all the 9 yards. If you guys are an audio listener, right, PocketCasts, Spotify, wherever, Apple Podcasts, make sure you guys hit those stars, leave a review, say what you got to say, but say it with your chest because me and Coach want to hear it. Coach, I have my final question for you of the day, which, by the way, I appreciate you so much. This has been one of my favorites for sure. It's been really, really good. You've brought a lot of knowledge to me, and hopefully to all the listeners, and so I really appreciate jumping on. It's really been good. But the final question is debate question. What state produces the best high school volleyball?
Oh, I don't know if there's much of a debate here.
So I have an idea, know what you're going to say, because I feel like I know, but I'm going to let you say it.
I got to say, currently, it's got to be Texas.
Texas.
Like, everyone's recruiting out of Texas. Everyone's looking down there. And, I mean, just the population density with all of their high-level clubs, it's a tough one, man. Like, when I talked to that coach from Eastfield, from Dallas, and I'm like, he's like, there's 9 million people in that Dallas area, and there's like 160 clubs in that Dallas area.
Just right there.
You know, and I'm just kind of like, that's crazy, because in this entire state of Minnesota, it's 5 million people, and we're all in clubs. Our clubs are all over the place, and I don't even think we have 180 clubs if we combine them all. You know what I mean? Right. So I mean, right now, I mean, Dallas has got a pretty strong hold. You know, there's a few, there's definitely some high level clubs. You know, Michigan's got theirs. You know, Florida's got some, but in terms of just the amount of kids that are coming out of it, it's got to be that.
It's got to be Texas. Okay.
It's got to be Texas.
I respect it, man. I lived in DFW for about 2 years, so I understand completely. You know, obviously the high school talent's crazy, and I watched some SEC like football media days, and they're like, we always hit Dallas because, you know, they produce, you know, triple digit D1 athletes versus where they were. They're like, you might find a single digit, right? So I can agree. There's talent is high there, so 100%. So yeah, okay, Texas it is. Coach, I appreciate jumping on. I would love to have you come back on one of these days, kind of talk maybe more day to day, right? One of the maybe some behind the scenes, like I actually have a second episode that I have kind of programmed that I've done before. So if you ever have a chance to go listen to that one, but I would love to have you back on and talk again. It was really good. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. It's always kind of fun to just talk volleyball and just, you know, just to kind of reevaluate my why. You know, like I'm always like, do I change it? You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, I like where it is right now, you know? And like I said, with our athletes, you know, when we go on that journey with them, like they might change it, you know? And so if they do, then we still have to, you know, I mean, we get to move, and that's the joy of coaching. You know, we get to be the best that we can be, you know, that we can be for our athletes. And if that means changing, then we change.
Yeah, got to evolve sometimes, you know, and even if it's more than just the schemes, sometimes it's personally in our whys. So I love that. Hell yeah. So I appreciate you jumping on here again. If you guys have any questions that you'd like me to ask Coach Kam for the next time, or maybe the next volleyball coach, make sure you guys let us know. Coach, I appreciate you again so much. But with that being said, we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.